Your home sold for $800,000, but how much do you actually keep? When you factor in things like commission and closing costs and taxes, the number that you walk away with could be much different than your actual sale price. It's important to know what you're walking away with because when you're selling your home, it's one of the biggest financial decisions people make. And if you're not prepared for these unexpected costs, the surprise could be painful. So in this video, I'm going to break down all of the costs involved in selling your home in Ontario and in Canada so that you know exactly what you'll be walking away with when you go to sell your home. First up, let's talk capital gains tax. If the property isn't your primary residence, let's say it's a rental or a cottage, you could be subject to capital gains tax when you go to sell. So in Canada, only 50% of your gain on a property is taxable. So if you bought for $500 and sold for $800, only $150,000 of that is actually taxable, not the full $300,000. And how is it taxed? That $150,000 is actually added to your tax bill at the end of the year. Another thing to throw into capital gains, the actual tax that you're charged, it really varies depending on your income. This is one of the biggest costs that a seller can face when they go to sell a home that is not their primary residence. Now, the good news is there is a principal residence exception in Canada. If you are selling your primary home, you do not pay capital gains. But since 2016, you must still report the sale of a primary residence with the CRA. If you skip this, you may be hit with penalties or stuck with the capital gains tax. So after capital gains, the next biggest line item is usually realtor commissions. In Ontario and Canada, commissions are negotiable, but let's stick with the figure of 5%. And this is a figure that is split between the buyer agent and the agent that sells your home. And remember, these commissions are actually subject to HST in Canada. So your 5% on $800,000 is about $40,000. And then when you add in the HST, you're looking at about $45,000 in realtor commissions. Another tax that is applicable when trading real estate is HST on a new build or a substantial renovation. Now, for most resale homes, this is a non-issue. But if you're doing something like a flip or a substantial renovation on a home where it could be almost new, you could be subject to HST on the sale, adding a further 13% onto your sale price. Now, once you have a firm deal, it's time to look at legal fees. Now, legal fees in Ontario are paid by both the buyer and the seller. On the seller side, you're looking at something like $1,500 to $2,500 for a lawyer to close the property, transfer title, and do all the closing documents on your behalf. On top of that, there can be closing adjustments for things like utilities or property taxes that are done on closing. So if you're behind on your taxes or you're moving at the end of the year, you will have to pay those adjustments, and that can be a substantial line item if you're not paying attention to it. Now, a tax that is paid by the buyers but a seller should be aware of is land transfer tax. A seller should be aware of this because it is a tax that a buyer has to pay when they go to purchase the home. So if you're in an area like Toronto where there's a double land transfer tax, it could impact the affordability that a buyer has when purchasing a home. Finally, even if you don't owe any tax and you're selling your primary residence, it's really, really important that you report the sale with the CRA when you do your taxes each year. The CRA has been cracking down on this with homeowners that are trying to skate by without reporting a sale. Missing the reporting can lead to penalties or problems later, so it's really important you don't miss this step when you go to sell your home. So let's go back to that $800,000 sale example. Between legal fees, commissions, and if it's not your primary residence, capital gains, you could be walking away with a lot less than that $800,000 line item, thinking you'd be in the line of, $750,000, $725,000. The key takeaway is don't just think about the sale price, think about your net and what you're walking away in pocket when you go to sell your home. If you're thinking about selling in Ontario, it's really important that you sit down with your real estate agent, your lawyer, heck, even your accountant to sort out exactly what costs you'll be liable for when you go to sell your home, because planning ahead can save you big money in the long run. If you found this helpful, hit like and subscribe for insightful info on the Ontario real estate market. And if you're planning a move, reach out. I'd love to help you understand your numbers and figure out what your net profit will be when you go to sell your home.